Welcome back to Agency Success Community at hosting.com. We've got a great live stream today with Chris Hines, COO of Equalize Digital. Chris oversees at Equalize Digital, and I'll put a link to the agency website, oversees business development, human resources, financial operations of the company, and he also consults with companies for accessibility. Now, you probably heard about Equalize Digital. You probably heard about Chris and Amber, his wife and partner at Equalize Digital. Very prolific contributors, thought leaders in WordPress, in accessibility, something we really need. We've had Amber on several times. We'll be asking both of these two to come back again because this is such a big topic, Chris, and an important topic for many reasons. And I'm sure you're going to share some of that, but I'm excited to have Chris today. And thank you, Chris, for being here and sharing about accessibility related to agency work. I know you got a great topic. I've seen your slides. This is going to be one you're going to want to get your pencil and paper, however you take notes, and start taking some notes. As always, in the Zoom app here in the bottom of the screen is a Q&A button. If you have questions for Chris, if we have time, I'll collect those, share those with Chris with whatever remaining time we have. But this is a loaded live stream today with a great expert in this. And thank you so much, Chris, for being here and sharing your insights and expertise with our agency success community.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. I will always shout this information from the rooftops because the reality that we're in right now is that the majority of the web is currently not fully accessible. It could be improved. And I think that agencies and freelancers and folks in digital business, like myself and like a lot of the attendees here, are in this really unique position where you can be part of the solution to that. What this presentation will not be about is kind of the high level accessibility laws or how to test for accessibility or those sorts of things. Those will be for a separate training. This presentation is really focused on the business process, business implementation, sales side of accessibility with some real case studies and some real offers that you could put together that your team could execute on with minimal downtime for training and getting up to speed. So with that being said, I will go ahead and just share for background. I'm, as Corey was nice enough to say, I'm the COO at Equalize Digital. I've been working in digital and WordPress and accessibility and the intersection of those things for about a decade now, so since around 2016. And like I said, a lot of that time's been on accessibility heavy projects. I founded Equalize Digital with my partner Amber and our partner Steve, our CTO, because we found that the existing tools and systems for accessibility in WordPress were both cumbersome and expensive. And now I spend most of my time talking to all sorts of organizations, teams, individuals, whoever they are, to help them get unblocked on accessibility, whatever those blockers are. Today, we're going to be focusing on how agencies can turn their accessibility backlog into profit and why your accessibility backlog very likely might be your next big revenue stream. So thank you again, Corey and hosting.com. And let's go ahead and dive in because there is a lot to get through. So here's a big question, right? Why do agencies have large accessibility backlogs? Most of you probably do. And here's why, or here are some reasons why that could be the case. Number one, accessibility might be a totally new concept to you, and you're gathering information still. Or you're aware of accessibility, but there's no in-house champion to build a comprehensive program around it. So you haven't identified tools, processes, some of those things. Or accessibility is being championed and there is a program being built, but there's a lack of buy-in from your customers. That's another super common issue that leads to accessibility debt and accessibility backlogs. Or you're enthusiastic about accessibility at all levels. Your customers, you have an in-house champion, you have the program, everything's there, but there are knowledge or tool gaps that end up forming barriers kind of automatically. So there can be multiple reasons. It isn't necessarily the agency's fault, as we've just shown. It could be a knowledge issue. It could be a customer demand issue. It could be multiple things. And to start us off, what I'd like to do is tell the story of two very different digital agencies, both of whom have bid on an accessible website project. So imagine we have two agencies facing off on the same website project. One is called the Ostrich Agency. The other is the Fox Agency. And what I'm about to share is based on very slightly altered numbers and scopes from two roughly equivalent real world projects. So while we're kind of taking like a parable or a fable approach to this, it is based and grounded in real world stuff. The agencies that delivered these projects are what I would call archetypes of real world agencies that I encounter frequently in my conversations. So let's start with what their general philosophy is. And from there, we'll dig into the website projects themselves. And for the attendees on this call or people listening on a recording afterwards, you will probably see a little bit of yourself in one or both of these agencies. So first, we have the Ostrich Agency. Now, they prioritize rapid execution over careful strategy. They focus on getting short-term quick wins. They are business results focused as far as how they scope and how they build projects, and they rely on automated tools for accessibility. The Ostrich's pitch can kind of be summarized as we'll get the same results as the Fox Agency in less time and for less money. Let us help you check this off your list so you can get on to the next priority. The Fox Agency, their philosophy is starting with a good plan, creating long-term value, having a user-centric focus, so the end user of the website, and they account for accessibility throughout the project from beginning to end, and they don't necessarily rely solely on automated solutions. The Fox's pitch can be best summarized as smart planning today saves headaches tomorrow. It will take longer and cost more, but that's what it takes to do the job right. And here is the client. Let's introduce them. So this is based on a real company, but I've altered some details. But we're calling them Hearth and Harvest Cafe or Harvest and Hearth Cafe. They are a specialty cafe and artisanal bakery located in Fremont, California. They're this cozy locally owned cafe and bakery. They specialize in farm-to-table ingredients, hand-baked goods, and they've been a go-to spot for local professionals, students, and families who are looking for kind of a more high-quality, upmarket coffee, pastry, casual lunch type experience. Their business generates around $700,000 in annual revenue. They operate with a small team of about 9 employees who handle day-to-day ops, and they've been in business for a while, so they've kind of leveled out their processes, and they have a reasonably healthy profit margin for their industry. As far as their baseline technical specifications for this particular project, they're looking for a custom theme or a custom build. They want 4 to 5 designed pages or layouts. They would like to have a contact form. They want integrations with off-the-shelf online ordering and reservation systems. And the baseline kind of audit of the website content is likely to include about 25 web pages, 10 PDF files, and that are 30 pages total. And these are like event and catering menus and their existing menu, as well as one 5-minute video that showcases their local partnerships. The website gets around 20,000 visitors per month on average, which is pretty darn healthy. And their best guess for converting a website visitor to a guest in the cafe is 0.15% based on customer surveys at checkout, as well as their point of sale data. So they have a $25 customer check average and a 12.5% profit margin, roughly. Let's see how the Ostrich is going to approach this. So they are going to utilize popular no-code page builders to generate the custom layouts for the client quickly. So the designs are being done in browser and they're accounting for mobile right there. The primary criteria for the ordering and reservation system is that it integrates easily with their existing tech stack that the Ostrich uses to build. So this keeps budgets lower. They're really just concerned with being able to implement quickly. The page builder's built-in form solution is used for the contact form, and the content is migrated as is from various docs and adapted to approved layouts. The promotional video and the PDFs are embedded as is in their designated areas, and no efforts are made to make them accessible. And they are checking color contrast and alt text for accessibility, which is good. And they recommend a popular accessibility overlay widget, assuming that it will handle everything else. As far as what the Ostrich is budgeting, they budgeted a base design dev cost of $8,000. They're planning for around 4 hours to do those color contrast and alt text remediations. And the $1,500 is a per year cost for the overlay or toolbar solution. They're proposing $600 in annual maintenance costs, or about $50 a month, for the total cost in year one coming out to $10,500. The overlay budget is paid out to a different company, and we will come back to that later. The Fox's approach is to collect content before design and review that to ensure that the structure is clear, as well as any calls to action. And then they evaluate multiple options for an ordering and reservation system, and they select the option that can be used by the broadest audience, even if it's not necessarily the most compatible with the Fox's technology stack. They design and build from a set of boilerplate components that can be modified to fit the customer's spec as established in the design, and accessibility is considered both at the design and the code level. This, of course, takes longer. The agency uses a standard form building solution that they know has accessible outputs when configured correctly, and the promotional video receives captioning and transcripts. The PDFs are mostly converted to web pages to improve their discoverability in search, except for the 2 sample menus, which are remediated manually. In addition to the early stage test, they actually bring in an outside expert to validate that the website's major components conform to WCAG 2.2 AA, which for the uninitiated, that's a internationally accepted accessibility standard. And they also put an automated scanning and monitoring plan in place. The Fox's budget comes out to $12,000 for base design and dev, and then they are budgeting about $190 for scanning, 18 hours or about $1,800 for the evaluation, another $1,200 for remediation of accessibility issues, about $150 for the multimedia accessibility, that's the remaining PDFs and video, and then they're estimating about $1,200 or about $100 a month in maintenance costs for a total year one cost of $16,540. So as we can see, substantially more, about 50% more than the Ostrich's budget. The scanning budget here, that's the cost of Accessibility Checker, our plugin, which is a per year cost for a single site. The evaluation kind of assumes that they're spending about 1 hour per design and 2 hours of additional evaluation time per unique page, plus another 4 hours to have a professional evaluate the header and footer. And then they are basically taking that budget and adding about 10% of it to create a base budget for remediating the accessibility issues that get found during the evaluation. And then the multimedia is based on average cost for captioning, transcription, et cetera. So, and they charge more for maintenance as well because they're planning to monitor for accessibility on an ongoing basis. So let's briefly look at the total direct costs here. So in scenario one, where the Ostrich agency wins, we have $10,500 for year one, and then years 2 through 5 are $2,100 a year. So that's the ongoing maintenance as well as the overlay costs. What we're excluding here is, fees for potential plugins or hosting partners or things like that. We're kind of just focusing on what the agency collects or the overlay company as well. In scenario two, with the Fox agency, they're charging $16,540 in year one, and then it's $1,390 per year for years 2 through 5 for a total of $22,100 over 5 years. Now, I want to spend some time looking at ROI on these projects, starting with the Ostrich agency. So in a real world project that was scoped similarly and delivered similarly, this is kind of what we saw in a before and after and based on those numbers. So the modern design that the Ostrich agency implemented actually does increase conversions to about 0.5%, up from 0.15%. So a pretty significant jump as far as going from, it's basically like a 3x increase in their conversions. There's a short-term drop in traffic in year one, which stabilizes in years 2 through 5. There is a modest net increase over the 5-year period of 5% for traffic. The new bookings and catering options, along with increased traffic and conversions, generate about $91,000 in additional annual revenue, or about $9,000 in actual profit per year. And in year 3, unfortunately, because of the approach, This cafe did get hit with an accessibility lawsuit. They're forced to settle, and they pay a $15,000 settlement plus $5,000 in attorney's fees. And then they have to, in addition to that, pay to have their website fully audited and remediated, which ends up costing them around $21,000. The project finishes 3 months sooner, though, and so that puts $22,000 back in because they were faster than the Fox agency. But at the end of all of this, based on actual profit, their 5-year ROI is actually negative $5,576.56. And we calculate that ROI by taking their projected total increase to actual profit, including that increase for finishing sooner than the Fox agency over the 5-year period. And then we subtract the agency costs, the unexpected audit remediation and lawsuit costs in year 4. And when we do that, we end up with this slight loss. Now let's look at the Fox agency's results. So, and again, these are based on statistics and real world projects of a similar scope and size for a similar type of customer. The accessible redesign actually jumps conversions up to a total of 2%. So that's not a 2% increase of conversions. That is an increase from 0.15 to 2.0. And year over year traffic comparisons show a nearly immediate post-launch traffic gain of 15%. There's also, because of that increase in traffic and conversions, the new highly usable features as far as catering and reservations and things of that nature, they're able to generate $269,000 in additional annual revenues, which comes out to around a little over $27,000 in actual profit per year. And in year 3, the monitoring program that the Fox agency had put in place did detect some accessibility regressions on the website, probably due to some software updates or some content changes that maybe the restaurant's management team made that they shouldn't have. But at the end of it, they did have to do a smaller audit and remediation project totaling about $15,000 to correct course, but they are never sued. So similar to before, we're calculating the ROI by taking the actual projected total increase in profit over the 5 years, subtracting the Fox agency's costs, plus the accessibility refresh in year 3, and cleaning up all those issues. And totaling that up, we end up with an ROI of positive $125,700. The Fox agency's base 5-year budget is roughly just $3,000 more than the Ostrich agency, but it is statistically likely, based on real world project data that we have seen, to deliver a 5x return on investment based on these budgets. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this is $10,700 is the number or the amount of base revenue that the Ostrich agency actually left on the table or abandoned over that 5-year period by choosing to automate accessibility via an overlay solution, which, by the way, didn't work. The company still got sued. Their website was still found to not be accessible. Again, real world statistics support this outcome. This might not seem like a big deal for just one project over a 5-year period, but what if you're doing that for 50 clients or 100 clients, right? Ignoring or deferring accessibility doesn't just cost your clients, it actually also costs you in potential revenue. But the good news is, even if you've been doing that for years, there's an opportunity to start tackling accessibility debt right now and unlocking some of that missed revenue. So here's how accessibility debt typically gets introduced. 1, through an agency's design, development, or content entry practices. There are multiple vectors there, whether it's in design, inadvertently designing something with poor color contrast, or having a incorrect hover state on a button, or something with the navigation menu, right? Or in development, developing with inaccessible code and not having any checks to catch that before that code gets pushed to production. Or in the content entry itself, right? Forgetting to put all text on images, putting headings out of order. There are lots of things just in an agency's processes that can be vectors for the introduction of accessibility debt. It can also be introduced through no fault of your own, really, just through off-the-shelf tools and templates that come bundled with these issues just built in, right? You buy a product from a WordPress product company, whether it's a theme, a plugin, something like that, that has some sort of front end output that you need to fulfill a client objective. And little do you know, without the proper testing or having some sort of automated scan done on it at the very least, that tool that you just bought that you've implemented for your client is actually injecting or introducing accessibility issues directly onto the site. The other possibility is client decisions and actions can certainly introduce accessibility issues, particularly for non-technical clients, right? And if you receive a client request, or whoever's receiving client requests on your team, unless they kind of have that ear for a request that might cause a usability issue, which could impact, conversions, traffic, all the things we've been talking about, they may not push back on that client request, and it may just get done, right? Like white text on a hot pink section for a CTA for a company picnic or something like that. There are requests that can come in from unsavvy clients that can harm accessibility when they are fulfilled. And the final one, and this one is super common still, which is a lack of scope or resources dedicated to automated and manual accessibility testing. Because if you cannot see the issues or you don't know they're there, then it's really hard to solve them, right? Here's how accessibility debt typically manifests. And if you are seeing this type of thing in your projects, or your clients are talking about these sorts of things or things that these might cause, that's a clue that you may have an accessibility issue. Number one is lost time. So it actually takes way more time to go back and fix accessibility issues that were introduced during a build process or during a project. And that can create a loss of productivity as teams have to go back and correct issues that maybe would have been preventable if an accessibility consideration had been introduced in content or design or development, just some baseline checks or linting or things of that nature. And I will get into some specific tools and solutions that can help alleviate that later. The other is deficient user experience. So decreased usability for all users, declining traffic, complaints from users about frustration, or just high abandonment rates on landing pages or contact forms or checkout flows. If you are seeing a high bounce rate, or you are maybe using a tool like Hotjar to record user sessions, and you see a lot of users just coming, noodling around for a few seconds and then leaving, you might have an accessibility or a usability issue. Then there's lost revenue. So there is a total loss of potential customers because of these accessibility debt issues. You can also, and we've seen this with reduced loyalty, reduced repeat business, and even negative impact on brand reputation, particularly if that brand has a fully accessible competitor, that actually becomes a pretty distinct advantage in the market. And then finally, increased risk. And this is one we probably hear about most often. But in terms of business outcomes, the risk of lawsuit and litigation is probably one of the least important ones as far as like what it does to the bottom line. Because really what has the bottom line here, or the bottom line impact, is the upside, right? The increased traffic, the increased conversions, the better usability overall. Yes, lawsuits are painful. You might have to pay settlements and attorney's fees, and still have to pay at the end of all that to make your website accessible, as probably should have been done to begin with. But that risk is real. And when you are putting consistent effort into accessibility, that does get alleviated, that particular risk. But that is another way that accessibility debt manifests. So what does all this mean, right? So I think if we have salespeople on the call today, or project managers, or agency owners, people who help with scoping and selling projects, if you're starting to introduce accessibility as a component in your process or how you do things, when someone says to you, we just can't fit accessibility into this, I kind of want to reframe your thinking, because what I think they're actually saying short-term from their future time, their future user experience, their future revenue, and future profile. And with this, it's not really that accessibility is this all or nothing thing. So if what you feel like your team can do to start is to just use some automated scans and to manually fix what's in the header and footer and homepage, that is still substantially more than zero, and will have a significant real impact on both alleviating the negatives and enhancing the positive results that you can get from a website. And people like me in the accessibility space will always like encourage you to do more and to do better, but we're also going to cheer you on for doing something, right? Because something is better than nothing. So remember, progress, not perfection. And every bit of effort you put in now eliminates accessibility debt in these areas later. But the reality is, if you've been an agency for any amount of time, you probably have a collection of clients, and probably most of those clients, unless you have really robust accessibility programs and offerings and the clients are all paying for them, you probably have accessibility debt. So the question becomes, how can we turn accessibility debt into sustainable, profitable service offerings that actually benefit everyone? First, we need to do a little bit of framing, right? Because generally, if you're going to be reaching out to a customer about this, or you're going to be having these conversations with potential or existing clients, giving them a why that's going to resonate with them and that aligns with the offer you're planning on making is going to be one of the most critical things you do. And it can feel really intimidating to try to introduce this to existing customers, particularly if you're the one that built their website 2, 4, 6 years ago, right? Whatever it is. Because you might be worried that they're just going to turn it back around on you and be like, well, why didn't you do this to begin with, right? And there are a lot of different strategies to work with that, right? So you could do blog posts, webinars, drip campaigns to try to get the communication out. But I find, and what I wanted to do for this particular presentation is to just give this quick idea of what you could use as a starting point for direct outreach to existing clients in the form of an email, right? And the big key point here is to position yourself as an expert, as reliable, to position accessibility as an emerging area of best practice for their industry and in your own practice as an agency, which I think has this really succinct way of making it clear, like, hey, this wasn't included before. This wasn't something we were really doing before. Now it is, and we want to help you, right? But we want to keep it easy. We also want to keep it to the point. So I'm going to read out this email for our listening audience, but basically this is an example of real emails that we've seen work. But it says, "Hi, Sally," or insert your customer's name, right? "As part of my ongoing work, I'm always keeping an eye on how digital best practices are evolving, and I wanted to share a really important trend I'm tracking. In the last few years, digital accessibility has become a major strategic priority, driven both by new legal standards and a growing awareness of how much it actually drives bottom line results for organizations like Acme Co. Insert their business name, right? Because you're a valued client, I was proactively reviewing your site through this new lens, and I've identified several key opportunities for us to level up your site's quality to align with these new best practices. An update in this area would help you reach a wider audience, improve your site's search performance, and ensure all your customers have a great experience. I've put together a roadmap for what this looks like with specific milestones and the outcomes we'd expect. How does next Tuesday at 2 p.m. sound for a 15-minute primer on this?" I find, just a little asterisk on that here, that when you have a very specific time and date to talk to them, that lack of genericness tends to elicit a better or more favorable response versus just sending a booking link. I'd love to walk you through what I found and discuss how we can keep your site ahead of the curve. So, James, agency owner, right? So what this does is it positions you as an expert. It positions this as an emerging area of best practice that you are trying to help them conform to. And it makes it very clear that there's going to be milestones, outcomes, and that you have a structure or a plan to do this for them. And again, we're going to get into some examples of types of plans or types of structures you could introduce with some tools that can help make those things easier. So with that said, I'm going to share 2 different concepts that you can frame around or use as scaffolding to build your own plans, both of which we've done at Equalize Digital hundreds of times, and that I have seen all sorts of individual freelancers and agencies do successfully. The first concept is the rebuild approach. And we actually did a whole presentation on this called Remediate versus Rebuild, and the whole debate of, when is it better to try to fix what you have in terms of accessibility versus just start over, right? And maybe I can work with Corey to get a link to that in the kind of recap of this presentation. I didn't think to include it ahead of time, but that is a particularly good piece of content that you could go check out. But basically, to put it in a nutshell, I think that there is kind of a line that you reach where if the website is no longer fulfilling any marketing utility for the customer whatsoever, and it's starting to look really dated, and they have repeatedly expressed frustration with it and a willingness to rebuild, and there are accessibility problems or accessibility debt you can address, I feel like the accessibility debt piece becomes kind of icing on the cake for a whole rebuild proposal. So again, this may or may not be the right move depending on the age and performance of the current website or how the current website's built. But at a high level, when we're doing this, when we're proposing a rebuild, the result that we're selling to many customers who care about conversions, lead gen, are making money off their website, right? We're selling a high performance lead generation engine. It's designed to capture more of their potential market. So we can talk about how we're taking what they're already doing well on the existing website, if anything's left that is doing well, dialing up the usability, the utility, the quality, right? Because again, if a customer doesn't get or understand what accessibility is, there's no rule that says you have to use the word accessibility. We've seen over and over again that just observing these best practices at the end of the day is really just about quality, semantic code, good performance, good UX, right? And there just happens to be a set of standards. It happens to be called accessibility. It is not just for disabled people. It really helps everybody. But we're going to talk about how we're going to build in these best practices so that current users are more likely to engage longer and convert more, which will create a positive ripple effect across all their metrics, because with the improved code and semantic markup, their entire website is going to be more easily indexed by both AI and traditional search engine crawlers. And that ripple effect boosts traffic, which feeds back into even more conversions. So that's kind of the result that we're talking through with them. And as far as what to listen for in customer conversations or incidental back and forths with customers during check-in calls, that where this might be a good idea is if you see like an owner or founder expressing frustration around slowing or stagnating revenue, or inbound leads plateauing or not increasing, and they kind of express like some envy looking at competing brands in their area or in their industry who they feel like have better, more modern web presences. Or if you're talking to like a manager or an ops person at your client's company, you might be listening for them, talking about a competitor website being super impressive, or that maybe they're doing some SEO research and they see that their local competition is outranking them for virtually every keyword, and they're expressing frustration around that and looking for solutions. Or they just say more general blanket statements, like they feel like the website they have now is working against them, or that they can't do what they want, can't achieve what they want to achieve within the current technical makeup, or they just feel like they're falling behind on the digital marketing side. As far as our ROI potential for this, and we've covered this a little bit in the example projects, but we have seen accessible rebuilds increase traffic reliably by 15%. And to be clear, I am hedging down with that percentage. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I saw a e-commerce store owner on the WordPress subreddit post, and he said that he had done a whole accessibility overhaul in preparation for the European Accessibility Act because they sell in Europe. And he thought he had done something wrong with his Google Tag Manager tracking and analytics because he saw his conversions went up 28% in 2 months. So again, these are kind of conservative numbers, but the other thing that we see is adding 2 to 3% to a website's conversion rate. So to be clear, again, that's not increasing a 1% conversion rate by 3%. That is taking a 1% conversion rate to 4% or to 3%. So we see on average a 2 to 3% jump in the end conversion rate. And this is because accessible websites are usable both by humans but also search and AI crawlers. And you can apply these types of increases in these types of figures to their revenue, to their check averages, to their profit margins, and work backwards to try to do some back of the napkin math to project potential returns or ROI and make the case to them. And this works best, again, for customers who rely on their websites heavily to produce business outcomes. But talking about what the offer is and not covering how to fulfill it wouldn't be helpful for you. So I do want to cover some key tools that can help make an accessible rebuild easier and give you some quick tips. There's way more information than this on our website and in our other training materials, and I'll share some more resources towards the end. But this should be a primer to help get the gears turning and help you get started. First and foremost, having an automated built into WordPress, if you're using WordPress, scanning solution can be extremely helpful. I'm obviously a little biased. I think that Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker is one of the best solutions for this on the market that's built into WordPress. It can help you, and tools like this can help you scan and fix accessibility issues while you're building, while you're putting in content. And then for many of them, including ours, you can leave them active post-launch as part of a care plan or a monitoring plan as an early warning system to help maintain accessibility on the website. You can also, if you have clients who are super active and they like to go into their websites and do things, you can instruct your clients to check Accessibility Checker and make sure that they aren't in there adding regressions or adding issues. In addition to Accessibility Checker, some other tools that we've used and that we hear positive feedback from many, many other digital professionals. Number one is SlickPlan, super great for mapping out sitemaps, user journeys, content collection, and mapping the content collected to the sitemap if you're doing custom builds. It's super, super helpful for just mapping everything out, making sure you understand all the content that's actually going to be there. And if you need to map out user journeys, how users will move through the website and creating actual user flow charts and annotating, what should happen and when, particularly useful for things like portals or e-commerce, other things like that. Also the Stark plugins. And this is a platform that provides all sorts of automated accessibility checks at the design level. So if your team is designing in Figma or Sketch, or XD, Stark can integrate with that, and it can check for things like color contrast. It has like annotation features that helps you annotate, what heading level things should be, what should be body text, accessibility reminders, annotations, that sort of thing. Super, super helpful. And I would definitely have your designers or your design team check it out. So for the developers on the team, couple of recommendations that come from our CTO, Steve. One is called WebHint. This lets you test for accessibility as you're actively coding in whatever your coding platform of choice is. But basically, it's a tool that if you inadvertently start adding certain code level accessibility issues into your code, it will warn you. It will suggest alternatives. And then Axlinter, which is put out by DQ, which is one of the largest and most well-known accessibility companies globally. They have all sorts of different tools and systems, but the Axlinter does automated testing on pull requests for code and can automatically suggest or tweak or give you fixes. So even before you're doing something in the browser or in the backend of WordPress, you can be using things like Stark, WebHint, Axlinter, SlickPlan to have really good, not just testing, but also framing and a good plan around how you're implementing accessibility and where accessibility considerations need to happen. Some other quick tips to make this process easier for an accessible rebuild. Number one is building with accessible WordPress products. I know that's a very blanket statement, but there are WordPress products out there, and I will mention some of them a little bit later in this presentation, that are known for accessibility and prioritizing accessibility and not breaking accessibility horribly on updates, that sort of thing. Also, don't save accessibility for QA. As we saw with the Fox agency in that illustrative project that was based on a real world project that we were involved in, if you consider accessibility during discovery, during your content, during design, during development, by the time you get to the end, you're going to not have as many lingering accessibility issues left over. You're going to have less accessibility debt weighing your team down. You're going to be able to deliver more efficiently, and you will have better outcomes overall. And next tip is include some level of manual analysis by a professional accessibility expert. And there are lots of them out there. You can find them everywhere. We obviously do this kind of thing, but we certainly aren't the only ones. Just find an accessibility expert whose approach and process works for you, who does manual evaluation with screen readers, with keyboards, and audits against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and have them scope an audit with them for whatever amount you can fit into your budget. Because again, it's not all or nothing. So if you can only afford in the project budget to scope an audit for the header, footer, and homepage, just do that. And that's more than nothing, right? And it will get you tons of really useful feedback that will have a ripple effect across the entire website and enhance everything. Is it perfect? No. But is it progress? Absolutely. And just remember that it is very hard to fix what you can't control. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean things like third-party platforms, third-party embeds, or client content that the client says you can't change or manipulate at all, even to fix an accessibility problem. I would be very careful about promising the accessibility of anything where you cannot control the output. And again, we have resources that have more details on that, but those are my high-level tips to make those rebuilds easier. The other approach is the retainer approach. This is the alternative to rebuilding. And there are other accessibility services you can offer. These aren't the only two, don't get me wrong, but these are two that I think can fit well in an agency model. The retainer approach works well in situations where you feel like there is a relatively solid foundation to operate or build from. The website isn't that old, you know how it's put together, the customer is still reasonably happy with it. But in this case, the result we're really selling is ongoing performance optimization, brand insurance, continuous improvement, that sort of thing. This website it needs to be a key asset in order for this type of service offering to really work. So the company needs to be relying on it to deliver some pretty serious or pivotal business outcomes. And the service is built around, this retainer approach is built around protecting that asset and making it better every single month by systematically removing user frustration, enhancing conversions, and having a well-documented proactive strategy to track accessibility fixes over time to mitigate those legal and compliance risks we spoke about previously. And you're doing all this for a predictable monthly cost or retainer. When we're selling this, the types of pain points we're looking for, the things we're listening for in our conversations with clients are maybe an owner or founder who says they feel like they should be getting more out of their website than they already have. They're generally happy, but they think there could just be more, it could be better. Or if they're saying, they want to improve their website, but they don't want to invest in a full rebuild. They want to make incremental improvements that don't break the bank, that have a predictable cost. This is when our ears should be perking up. Or if they're saying things like, hey, I heard from a colleague or a competitor that they got hit with an ADA lawsuit or a demand letter, and I'm feeling some low level anxiety and I just want some peace of mind, right? These retainers can work in those sorts of contexts. Or if you're talking to an operations manager, they might be talking about how every once in a while someone reaches out and complains that they found some part of the website confusing, or that they weren't able to complete a key action on a website or on a particular user journey. And it's not a flood like an emergency, but it's just steady, right? Every once in a while they get one of these complaints and they feel like they're losing people, or maybe they're feeling a little embarrassed because they have to apologize that their website didn't work for someone. Some more things to listen to, maybe from an ops manager perspective. But for this one, the ROI here is really assuming they keep the existing website. The alternative is only to wait for a problem, right? Wait for a big budget buster explosion where, like we saw with the accessibility lawsuit and having to pay for auditing and remediation all at once, they're shelling out, $30,000, $40,000 potentially. Whereas with something like this, it's more like preventive medicine and not emergency surgery. And over time, the size of the retainer can decrease as you run out of things to improve as far as accessibility, usability. And really, one thing that I always fall back on is if they can't do, a rebuild, or it just doesn't make sense to do a rebuild in the face of growing legal pressure around accessibility, the best defense really is a good offense. And so every month being able to show them a report of the issues that were identified and the fixes that got deployed is really going to go a long way in helping them feel like they really have their arms around this and that they can mount a solid defense or push back on any sort of legal claims or threats. When it comes to retainers, there are a few different tools. One, again, is an automated scanning solution, whether it's ours, whether it's someone else's. As I said before, I'm a little biased, but Accessibility Checker, for instance, gives you the ability to deploy automatic fixes to a lot of common accessibility issues, around 30% of what we scan for, directly inside of WordPress with just checking a few boxes. You can get full site reports. So if they want that, you have an executive who wants a bird's eye picture of their automated accessibility scan performance, what percentage of tests they're passing, the number of unique issues that need to be solved, that sort of thing. The tool can deliver that, and also tracking progress over time. So we have a module where it will take a snapshot over time of the website every few days or every week or every time a major scan is run, and it will plot that on a graph. And so you can see very clearly as time goes on, are you accelerating fixes? Are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And you can drill down into reports and see what the problem areas are. As I alluded to before, sometimes it makes sense to swap things out. If you have an inaccessible thing, controlling what you can control and not trying to fix what you can't control. In those situations, there are a few tools that we can comfortably recommend that can make fixing really troublesome accessibility problems easier. So some easy swaps, if you want to call it that, are number one, for web forms, Gravity Forms. They are by far the number one web form solution for WordPress that prioritizes accessibility. And so far as how many we've tested, they do a really great job and they continuously make it a priority. If you have a block-based website that's using the modern block editor in WordPress, Cadence WP is one that we can comfortably recommend if you need accessible versions of blocks or layouts to pull into a website. They tend to do a good job. And then if you're using page builders or you need to introduce a page builder to get something done quickly, in our testing currently, Elementor is the page builder that performs best out of the box when it comes to accessibility. There's obviously a lot of settings and a lot of things you can change in Elementor around components, but as far as like baseline accessibility best practices, they're one of the better ones out there. And then for menus, particularly mega menus, which are super popular right now, Max Mega Menu is the mega menu solution that we feel is best out of the box when it comes to accessibility. I want to be clear there that it does have a couple of issues, but they're relatively minor. But that is the best one by a country mile compared to the others out there that we've tested. Generally speaking, if you can fix something within an existing theme or plugin or builder on a customer's website on one of these retainer plans, you should prioritize doing that versus adding something new to their technology stack. Virtually anything can be made accessible with enough technical knowledge and custom code, but it's not always cost effective to do it that way. And there may not be budget, either time or dollars, to just continue hammering away at a particularly stubborn, inaccessible component until you find a way to fix it in the code. So the solutions I'm recommending here, Gravity, Cadence, Elementor, Max Mega Menu, are just a handful, but they're being recommended because they can be used to swap, right? A particularly troublesome thing that is unfixable, and they have relatively common components that can be used. Other tips to make this easier, lead with automated tests first, then think about maybe introducing manual testing for these retainer plans. Also, rely on WordPress core when possible. WordPress core has a wonderful, long-established accessibility team that reviews releases and reviews things to make sure that what WordPress.org is putting out as far as official releases meets baseline accessibility standards for the most part. And so if you can prioritize using WordPress core, you basically are prioritizing a solution that has a built-in accessibility team that's reviewing all that stuff for free for everyone, right? And if you can't fix, as I said before, try to replace or swap components. Sometimes that can be easier. It's not always the best move, but sometimes that's what's necessary. and you can prioritize fixing global elements for the biggest impact. For example, Accessibility Checker has a report called Fast Track that highlights global elements that have the most accessibility problems. So you, with one action, you could potentially be resolving 200, 500, 1,000. I've seen upwards of 5,000 accessibility issues with one code or content change across a full site. Depends on the size of the site. But, kind of reaching the end here, and I think we will have some time for Q&A, but there are tons more helpful resources at equalizedigital.com. I think we'll find a way to get you these slides so that you can get these links, and you can go check these out. But one major one that I want to highlight is our Page Builder Accessibility Report. So our team spent literally hundreds of hours evaluating the top, I want to say 15, 16, it might have even been more than that, commercial page builders in WordPress, and rating them by their accessibility out of the box based on a standardized series of checks. And that report is free and available to everyone, and you can go check it out, just kind of see where your current stack measures up, and maybe consider some changes or experimenting with some new solutions. The next one is the shift left checklist, particularly helpful for rebuilds, because that's going to go way deeper than I did today on all the steps that you could add across all phases of a rebuild project to ensure a more accessible outcome. And then, of course, the Accessibility Checker plugin that has a free version, so you can start using it for free, and it helps you find and fix accessibility issues at scale from inside WordPress. No external platform tooling reliance at all, and zero limits on scanning across posts or pages in the free version. And then, of course, we do have some online courses and education materials. Some of those are free via the WordPress Accessibility Meetup, which we run. It's an official WordPress meetup that is 100% virtual and free. And then we also do have some paid online courses that teach you on a self-paced basis, learning accessibility testing with screen readers, and also building and selling profitable accessibility offers to clients, which go way deeper than what I went into today. But that is about the end, and we have 8 minutes for Q&A. Woo! We did it.
Wow. Chris, I'm going to let you take a breath and get some water. Thank you so much. That was packed. The one thing that I heard that just really raised my eyebrows, especially as you're talking to clients, is the 2 to 3% conversion lift. It's not just the right thing to do, it is, but it also has a very tangible business benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, 100%. And that's not cherry picking stats. I've actually seen bigger increases than that, and I've seen those reported in various places. But I don't like, aggrandizing the results. And so what I will say is across a dozen plus we've seen clear before and afters, 2 to 3% was the lowest, not the highest.
That's incredible. I mean, it's whenever you're having to do some really in-depth things like accessibility warrants, you're going to notice things part of the site that maybe aren't accessibility, but you're like, we need to fix that. I'm sure as that goes. So that's pretty incredible.
Absolutely. And the reason that this is so impactful, right, and I can't hammer this point home enough, is that these when you hear accessibility, what you should be hearing as a digital professional is quality, right? Accessibility is quality. It's quality code, quality UX, quality UI, and all of those quality markers are what gets these results, right? These big jumps in traffic, these big jumps in conversions. It's just about having a quality website at the end of the day.
Oh, that's excellent. Chris has given you all some really good stuff, and we will get the slides to you all. Thank you, Chris, for that, which is packed with great stuff, including, I was like, if people aren't screenshotting and looking what you're doing on that one email back to the client, that's it's an opportunity to have a conversation with the client, to help them, to protect them, and grow your business at the same time. So that was excellent. Well, hey, everybody, we got about 5 minutes left. If you have a question for Chris, now is the time. Put them in the chat or the Q&A button, and I'm watching both of those. Karen asked if it's possible to get a copy of the slide deck. Chris has offered that. We will put that in the email that goes out after this with recording and all those things to you if you've signed up for one of our live streams. We do that every single time, so absolutely. And thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else have a question for Chris?
That's okay if you don't.
I think
I know at the end of that, if I wasn't familiar with most of it, my head would be buzzing. Uh, but, um, you know, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed with information. I know I threw a lot at everybody, but all those resources are there. This knowledge is out there for you to consume, for you to take advantage of, and to start making accessibility a priority, which is going to, I mean, it's like it's a triple win, right? It's one of those rare triple wins, and maybe this is what I'll close with, since it doesn't look like there are questions. It benefits you, the agency. It also benefits your customer, and it benefits your customer's customer. It's very often that we have that win-win-win setup where it's really truly benefiting everybody. And I think that's why this stuff is so powerful. And honestly, with the results that I've been seeing on accessibility projects for years now, and it continues to be substantiated as an effective best practice for enhancing multiple things, not just the user experience for individuals with disabilities, which is incredibly important, but everybody is, it's just, I just can't believe it's flown under the radar for as long as it has. So I'm glad it's getting the line of day shown on it. And yeah, you can go check us out at equalizedigital.com. Also, if you go to wordpress.org right now, Accessibility Checker is in the initial shortlist cohort of featured WordPress plugins currently. So I think they selected around, it was like 8 or 10 to feature across all of .org and all of WordPress in the back end. So we were super honored to be selected for that initial group of plugins to be featured in that way. And I think they're going to be doing that on like a rolling basis going forward now to help surface plugins that are useful or helpful to the community. But shout out to you, Corey, and to hosting.com for hosting me and letting us share more about this important topic.
absolutely. We thank you all, and please be sure to say thanks. There's already some things coming in for this excellent presentation. I think you gave so much information. They're like, how do I go take some of these right now? That's what I'd be thinking. But yeah, we so much appreciate you, Equalize Digital. Obviously, Amber's been on several times. We want to have you all back, but Chris, thank you so much again for just sharing all this. And I put links in the chat to equalizedigital.com so you can go check out the resources. There are a ton there. But with that, I'll say thank you all for joining us. And we're excited to have you back at Agency Success Community. We've got webinars like this with great experts like Chris coming on, sharing this information. It's so invaluable. This is what we're doing to help you. We're partners in all of this. So thanks for being here. And thanks again, Chris, for everything you've done today.
My pleasure.
All right. See you all.